What if you did everything right, and it didn't matter? Imagine a man, Alistair. He is the perfect man, blameless, upright. A man so devoted, he rises before dawn to make offerings for sins his children have not even thought of yet. His life is a perfect, unbroken fortress of blessing and devotion. But what if that perfection isn't a protection? What if, in some unseen realm, that very righteousness is not a comfort but a provocation? What if his flawless faith doesn't build a wall but instead paints a target on his back? This is not a story about a man who falls into sin. This is the terrifying story of a man whose innocence becomes the subject of a cosmic wager. This is the story that asks the one question we are all afraid to voice aloud. Why does heaven stay silent when the innocent cry out? Why do the most terrible things happen to the very best people? Before we begin, you must ask yourself, if everything you love, your family, your home, your health, was stripped away from you in a single brutal day, not as a punishment, but as a test, would your faith survive the silence? If you are brave enough to witness the answer, press that like button, and be sure to subscribe to this channel. The trial of Alistair begins now. The hour was before the dawn, a pocket of stillness so deep it felt like the heart of eternity. Alistair moved while his entire household slept. He did not light a lamp. He had no need. His path was worn by decades of this same solitary ritual. This was the foundation of his life, the first act of every day, performed in the quiet dark before the world awakened. He had 10 children. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. They were good children, living lives of health, laughter, and feasting in each other's homes. They were the very picture of blessing. But Alistair, a man who saw the fibers that held the world together, understood that true devotion was not a simple matter. He knew the complex nature of the human heart. He knew that a shadow could pass through a mind, that a fleeting, unbidden thought could linger where it should not. So he acted as their guardian in a realm they did not even see. This morning, like all mornings, he brought the offering. He spoke the ancient words, a plea for purification, for a cleansing he could not command but could only request. He would name each of his 10 children in his heart. Perhaps he would whisper into the emptiness, his voice barely a breath. My eldest son has erred in his thoughts. Perhaps my youngest daughter has held a moment of hidden pride. He made this offering not for their actions, which were blameless in the eyes of the community, but for the unseen, unspoken possibilities of their souls. This was Alistair. He was a man of immense, unspoken substance. This was known across the lands. His wealth was not counted in coins, for coins were of little use in Valerian, a place defined by silence and oaths. His wealth was life itself. It was the thousands of sheep that moved as one body. It was the herds of camels that provided for long journeys. It was the many yoke of oxen, strong and steady, that did the heavy work. He possessed a legion of servants, though he did not use that word. He called them his household. He knew their names, the names of their children, and their histories. He presided over their disputes with a justice that was final, fair, and unquestioned. When he spoke, the matter was settled, not because he was feared, but because he was trusted completely. He lived by a code that seemed to come from the earth itself, ancient and unwritten. His integrity was not a performance. It was his nature. He was blameless. He was upright. He shunned the very idea of evil, turning his face from it as one would turn from a bitter wind. His life was a perfect, unbroken circle. The seasons turned. The herds multiplied. His children thrived, each one a testament to his blessed state. He gave charity to the few travelers who passed through his lands, his generosity spoken of in whispers. He acted as the priest for his family, and the provider for his entire community. There was no crack in his foundation. There was no shadow in any corner of his life. He was a man who had everything, and by all accounts of all men, he was a man who deserved it. But perfection is a dangerous thing. It is a stillness that draws the eye. It is a light that, by its very brightness, casts a shadow far beyond the visible world. Alistair, in his quiet devotion, in his flawless daily integrity, could not know what he was attracting. He could not know that his name, the name of a man who simply lived well in a forgotten land, was being spoken in a place where men do not walk. His very goodness, his complete and simple faith, had become a challenge. His unwavering silent worship had drawn the attention of eternity. The man who so diligently guarded his children from unseen thoughts was himself being watched by an unseen eye. Alistair finished his offerings. He felt the first subtle shift in the air that signaled the coming morning. He turned to go back inside, his duty done for another day. He was content. He was secure. He was, in all things, completely wrong. The perspective leaves the dark, quiet earth and shifts. It moves to a place beyond the realm of stars and suns, a place not bound by time or season. It was a day of accounting, a moment when the sons of the Creator came to present themselves, to report on the duties given to them in the vast, unseen expanses. They gathered, a silent assembly of purpose, and among them, walking as if by right, came the adversary. He moved with them, but was not one of them. He was the skeptic, the challenger, the one who looked for the flaw in all things. He was the voice that always asked, "Why?" The Creator spoke, and the assembly listened. The question was directed to the one who stood apart. "From where do you come?" The adversary's answer was devoid of pride or shame. It was a simple statement of his nature. "From roaming throughout the earth," he replied. "From going back and forth in it, and from walking up and down in it." His purpose was not to build or to serve. His purpose was to observe. A silence followed, a knowing pause. Then the Creator spoke again, a new question, and this one held a quiet note of pride. "Have you considered my servant Alistair?" The name, spoken in that place, caused a subtle shift. "There is no one on earth like him," the Creator continued. "He is a man blameless and upright, a man who honors me and who shuns evil with his whole heart." The adversary's attention was now fully engaged. He responded, and his voice was like a cold, thin blade, slicing through the warmth of the Creator's praise. "Does Alistair honor you for nothing?" he asked. The question hung in the stillness. It was a challenge. It was an accusation. "Have you not put a hedge around him?" the adversary pressed on. "Have you not built a wall of protection around his house and his family and his entire household and everything he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands. His substance, his herds, his very life have increased beyond measure in the land. He is protected. He is rewarded. That is not faith. That is a transaction." He paused, letting his logic settle. "He honors you because you have paid him to." Then came the true challenge, the heart of the matter. "But now," the adversary said, his voice lowering, "stretch out your hand. Do not bless him. Strike him. Take away everything he has. Remove the children he cherishes. Burn the fields he loves. Let him stand with empty hands, just as he was born. And I tell you this, he will renounce you to your very face." It was the oldest argument, the ultimate question. Is devotion born of love, or is it merely a payment for blessings received? The Creator looked upon the adversary. The test had been offered. The challenge had been made. The integrity of Alistair, a single man on a small spinning earth, had become the focal point of a question that echoed through all of creation. And then, the unthinkable happened. A terrible, majestic, and mysterious permission was granted. "Very well," the Creator said. "Everything he has. It is all in your power. Let the test proceed." A single limit was given, a final thread of restraint. But on the man himself, the Creator commanded, "You must not lay a hand, you will not touch him." A wordless understanding passed. The terms were set. The wager was made, though one of the participants, Alistair, had no knowledge of the game. Then the adversary went out from the presence of the Creator. He left that timeless place and moved back toward the world of fields and wind, carrying with him a storm that was not made of cloud or rain. It was a storm of ruin, and it was moving swiftly, inexorably, toward the quiet lands of Valerian. The day was perfect. It was a day like all the others, which meant it was a day of blessing. The sun was high in a clear sky, and in the fields, the work of Alistair's vast household proceeded with the rhythm of a contented heart. He was at his own house, overseeing the matters of his estate, a man secure in his foundations. Farther off, in the home of his eldest son, there was laughter. His 10 children, his 7 sons, and his 3 daughters were together, just as they always were. They were feasting, a celebration of family, of life, of the sheer, uncomplicated joy of their existence. It was a picture of peace, a portrait of a life built on solid ground. Alistair looked toward the horizon, and for the first time, he saw something out of place. A man was running. He was running from the pastures, running with a desperation that did not belong in Valerian. He did not slow as he approached. He collapsed at Alistair's feet, his chest heaving, his face pale with a terror Alistair had never seen. "Master," the man gasped, fighting for breath. "Master, I." Alistair waited, his own heart suddenly still. The oxen, the servant finally forced the words out. "We were plowing. The oxen were in their yokes, and the donkeys were grazing beside them, just as we always do." "What is it?" Alistair asked, his voice low. "Raiders," the man cried, his voice breaking. "Raiders from the eastern highlands. They came over the ridge, so fast. We did not see them until it was too late. They took them. They took all the oxen and all the donkeys, and the servants, your other servants. They put them all to the sword." A cold stillness settled over Alistair. All of them. The servant was weeping now, shaking. I am the only one. I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." Before the words had fully settled in the air, before Alistair could even form a response, another man appeared. This one was running from the high pastures, from the direction of the flocks. He stumbled past the first messenger, his clothes smoking, his face blackened. "Master!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. "Do not listen to him. Forget the oxen. Fire! Fire!" Alistair repeated, uncomprehending. "Fire from the sky!" The second man screamed, his eyes wild. It was not a storm. It was fire. It fell from the heavens. It consumed the sheep. All of them, thousands of them, turned to ash in a moment. And the servants, the shepherds, they were caught in it. They are gone. The man fell to his knees, his hands covering his face. "I am the only one," he whispered into the dust. "I am the only one who has escaped." Alistair stood frozen, a statue in the center of a collapsing world. His labor was gone. His worship, his offerings were gone. He heard a sound and looked up. A third man was approaching, not running but stumbling, holding his side. He was wounded, and he left a dark trail behind him. He came from the north, from the caravan routes. While he was still speaking, the third man said, pointing a trembling finger at the second, "Another tragedy struck." He grimaced, clutching his wound. "Speak," Alistair commanded, though his voice was a whisper. "The northern tribes," the man gasped. "They did not raid. They organized. They formed 3 raiding parties. 3 of them. They knew exactly where to strike. They swept down on the camel herds from all sides at once. It was a battle. We fought, Master, we. He choked, a sob mixing with blood. They were too many. They took all the camels, and they cut down every servant who stood in their way. He looked at his own wound, as if seeing it for the first time. Silence. A terrible, profound silence. Alright's work, his wealth, his entire commerce with the world, erased. He stood, unmoving, as the three messengers huddled in the dust at his feet, their terror a living thing. But the procession was not over. Another figure appeared on the path, this one coming from the direction of his children's celebration. This man was not running. He was walking, but it was the walk of a man who had left his soul behind. His clothes were torn, and his hair was white with a fine, settled dust. He did not look at Alistair, but at the ground before him. He walked until he stood before his master, and then he stopped. He trembled, but he did not speak. Alistair's heart, which had been cold, now turned to ice. "What is it?" he asked. "Speak. Tell me." The man looked up, and his eyes were hollow. His voice was not a cry, not a whisper, but a dead, flat thing. "Master," he said, "your sons and your daughters." Alistair did not breathe. They were in their eldest brother's house. They were happy. They were eating. They were drinking. And Alistair's voice was sharp. "A wind," the man said, his eyes unfocusing. "A great wind. It came out of the wilderness. It was not a normal wind. It howled, and it struck the house. But it did not strike one side. It struck. It struck all four corners of the house at the same time." He paused, and for a moment the only sound was the breathing of the other three men. "The house," the man continued, his voice breaking. "It could not stand. It collapsed. It fell. Inward. It fell on them." On all of them?" Alistair asked, though he knew the answer. The man nodded, tears now cutting clean paths through the dust on his face. "They are gone, all of them. The house is their grave." He looked at his own hands, his empty hands. "And I am the only one. I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." The four messengers were quiet. The story was told. Alistair stood alone. The sun was still high. The day was not over. But his entire world, everything he had built, everything he had loved, everything he had protected, was gone. It had been unmade in the time it takes a man to draw 4 breaths. And the only sound that remained was the wind, moving over a suddenly empty land. The 4 men had spoken. The silence that followed was heavier than all their words combined. The world had ended. Alistair stood, unmoving, looking at the first messenger, then the second, the third, and the fourth. Each man was a living monument to his ruin. His first movement was slow, deliberate. He raised his hands not to the sky, but to the collar of his own robe. He took the fine fabric, the mark of his station, and he tore it, a single, violent rip from his neck to his waist. He then did a stranger thing. He reached for a small, sharp blade, and he began to shave his head, the ritual act of profound grief, letting the hair that marked his honor fall into the dust. He was stripping himself of who he had been. When it was done, he did not stand. He fell. He fell forward onto the ground, not in a faint, but in a conscious act. He pressed his face into the very earth that had, in a single day, received all his hope. The messengers watched, terrified. They waited for the curse to erupt, for the scream of rage, for the blasphemy that must surely follow such a colossal, unjust loss. Instead, Alistair spoke. His voice was muffled by the ground, but his words were clear, and they were the last words the men expected to hear. "Naked," he whispered. "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return." He took a breath, a ragged, dusty breath that was more soil than air. "The Creator gave," he said, his voice gaining a strange, broken strength, "and the Creator has taken away." He then lifted his head. His eyes were not wild with madness, but clear and filled with a pain too deep to measure. He spoke the final, impossible words into the empty air. "Blessed be the name of the Creator." The first test was over. The challenge had been met. And the unseen record of his life noted that in all this, Alistair, in all his agony, did not sin. He did not charge the Creator with any wrongdoing. The scene shifts. Again, in that timeless place, the sons of the Creator were gathered. And again, among them, stood the adversary, his purpose unchanged, his expression unreadable. The Creator spoke first, his voice directed at the challenger. "Have you considered my servant Alistair? There is still no one like him in all the earth." The Creator continued, "He still holds fast to his integrity. He has not wavered. And he does this even though you incited me against him, to ruin him without cause." The adversary did not flinch. He did not look defeated. "A small matter," the adversary replied, his voice a cold dismissal, skin for skin. He stepped forward, his case already prepared. "You are mistaken. A man will give all that he has for his own life. You took his property, you took his children. These are all things outside of him. He remains untouched. His own body is whole. He feels no pain himself. His grief is for others." The adversary leaned in, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "But you stretch out your hand now. You touch him. Strike his flesh, strike his bone. Let him feel the fire in his own veins. Let him understand what it is to be ruined, not just in circumstance, but in his very body. And I promise you this, he will renounce you to your face." The challenge was absolute. The silence stretched. The Creator looked at the adversary, then at the unseen tapestry of Alistair's life, a life now hanging by a single trembling thread of faith. "Very well," the Creator said. "The permission was given a second time. He is in your hands." A final, critical limitation was set. "But you must spare his life. His breath is not yours to take." The adversary smiled. It was not a smile of joy, but of cold, certain satisfaction. He turned and went forth from the presence of the Creator. The scene shifts back. Alistair is still on the ground. He has not moved for a long time. The messengers have gone, perhaps to flee, perhaps to bury the dead. He is utterly alone in the dust. He does not see the shadow pass over him. He does not feel the unseen presence that has come for him. He only feels the change. It begins not as a pain, but as an itch, a deep, burrowing, maddening sensation under his skin. He scratches, but the relief is fleeting. The itch turns to fire. The fire erupts. Alistair cries out a sound of pure physical agony that all his grief had not yet pulled from him. He looks at his hands. His skin is breaking, rising in angry, painful, weeping sores. It moves up his arms, across his chest, down his legs. It consumes him. In a matter of moments, the second test has begun. The adversary has struck him from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, with a torment of the flesh so profound, so complete, that death itself might seem a mercy. The great house of Alistair was empty. He was no longer there. He had moved, or been moved, to the place where all refuse was taken, the heap of ashes outside the settlement, where fires were burned. He was an outcast, not by the decree of any person, but by the decree of his own suffering. He had become a thing to be avoided, a sight of terror and sorrow. He sat in the gray, warm ash. His torment was unrelenting. The fire in his skin, the agonizing, unceasing affliction gave him no rest. He had found a piece of broken pottery, a sharp-edged shard, and he used it to scrape at his own flesh, not for relief, but simply to exchange one kind of pain for another. He was in this state when his wife, the only human soul left to him, came to find him. She had wept until she had no tears left. She had seen her home destroyed, her wealth vanish, and her 10 children buried under the ruin of a house. And now she looked upon her husband, the man who had been her rock and her priest, and she saw this creature sitting in filth, scraping at his own wounds. A noise of despair, a sound of utter brokenness tore from her throat. "Is it still there?" she asked, her voice a rasp. Alistair did not look up, his hand continuing its terrible, rhythmic motion with the shard. "Your integrity," she screamed, the words sounding like a curse. "Are you still holding on to it? You sit there, blameless, upright. And for what?" She gestured at the empty land around them. "Look at what your integrity has earned you. Look at what the Creator has paid you for your devotion." She was weeping again, but her tears were fire. "Your children are dead, Alistair. Our life is over. And you sit in the ashes and hold on to a word." He finally paused, his hand trembling, but he did not look at her. "There is only one thing left," she whispered, her voice suddenly cold and clear. "Do the only thing that makes sense. Renounce him. Renounce the Creator. Curse him for what he has done. Say the words." She took a desperate breath. "And die. Just die. Let it be over." Alistair slowly turned his head. He looked at her, his afflicted face, a mask of sorrow that was not just for himself. He saw that she, too, was a victim, her mind shattered by grief. He spoke, his voice low and cracked. "You speak," he said gently, as one of the foolish women speaks. He found the strength to continue, his words forming slowly, each one a great effort. "What are we? What is our life? Shall we accept only good from the hand of the Creator? And when trouble comes, shall we not also accept that?" His wife stared at him, a look of uncomprehending horror on her face. He had given his answer. He would not yield. She turned, a wordless wail escaping her, and fled, leaving him alone once more in the ashes. But he would not be alone for long. The news of what had happened to Alistair was not a quiet rumor. It was a shock wave that rolled across the lands. It was a story so terrible, so complete in its ruin, that it defied belief. It was carried by shepherds, by the few surviving servants who had fled, by travelers who had seen the emptiness where a great household once stood. And the news, in time, reached his 3 friends. They were old men, men of substance and wisdom themselves, living in their own lands. There was Cormac the elder, a man who built his understanding on the foundation of experience. There was Peregrine, the traditionalist, who held the wisdom of the ancestors as his highest law. And there was Thane, a man of rigid, burning dogma, certain in his knowledge of right and wrong. They heard of the raiders. They heard of the fire from the sky. They heard of the wind from the wilderness. They heard of the 10 children, all gone. And later, they heard of the terrible sickness that had claimed Alistair's own body. By ancient unspoken agreement, they each left their homes. They made a pact to meet on the road and go to him together. Their purpose was clear, to mourn with him and to comfort him. They journeyed for many days. They found him just as his wife had, outside the settlement, on the heap of ashes. When they saw him, even from a distance, they stopped. This could not be him. This broken figure, this husk of a man, could not be the great and upright Alistair they knew. But as they drew closer, they saw his eyes, and they knew. Their own wisdom, their own stature, all of it dissolved. They did not speak. They did not offer counsel. Their grief was too immediate, too horrifying. They cried out, weeping aloud, their voices echoing in the desolate air. Then, as one, they tore their own robes. They bent down, grabbed handfuls of the same dust and ash, and threw it over their heads, covering themselves in his sorrow. And then they did the last thing they could do. They sat down on the ground with him. Cormac Saturday, Peregrine Saturday, Thane Saturday. They sat in the ashes, surrounding their friend, and they did not speak. Alistair did not speak. For 7 days and for 7 nights, no one said a word. The silence was absolute. It was a monument to a suffering so vast that language itself had failed. They did not need to speak, for they all saw the truth. His grief, his torment, was too great for any words to bear. For 7 days and 7 nights, the world had been defined by silence. The 4 men sat in the ashes, a living tableau of grief. The only sounds were the wind, the scraping of Alistair's shard on his own skin, and the shallow, pained breaths of the afflicted. Cormac, Peregrine, and Thane had not uttered a single word. They had come to comfort, but in the face of such absolute ruin, all words were exposed as hollow and useless. The silence had become a weight, heavier than any stone. After this, on the 8th day, Alistair opened his mouth. He did not speak to his friends. He did not speak to his absent wife. He did not speak to the Creator. He spoke to the void. He spoke to the air. And he cursed the day of his birth. His voice was a dry, rasping thing, a sound that had forgotten life. "Let it perish," he whispered, the first word tearing from his throat. His friends startled, their heads lifting. "Let the day perish, the day on which I was born, and the night that said, a man-child is conceived. Let that night be cursed." His voice grew stronger, fueled by the very agony it described. "Let that day be darkness. Let the Creator not regard it from above. Let no light shine upon it. Let darkness and the shadow of death claim it for their own. Let a cloud settle on it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it." He was not raving. His words were precise. They were the words of a mind that had spent 7 days in the dark, methodically dismantling his own existence. "As for that night," he continued, his eyes fixed on nothing, "let thick darkness seize it. Let it not be joined to the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Let that night be barren. Let no joyful cry be heard in it. Let those who curse days curse that day, those who are skilled to rouse Leviathan." He was calling for his own beginning to be erased from time, to be blotted out of the memory of creation. It paused, a long, shuddering breath. His friends watched, frozen in horror. This was not the man they knew. This was not the praise of the man who had lost everything. This was the unraveling of that man. Alistair turned his gaze from the abstract day of his birth to the fact of his life itself. His voice dropped, thick with a why that was deeper than any ocean. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did I not die from the womb? Why did I not perish when I came from my mother?" His eyes, weeping with infection and grief, found Cormac's. "Why were there knees to receive me? Why were there breasts that I should nurse? Why was I not hidden, like a stillborn child, like an infant who never saw the light?" He hunched forward, the agony of his body momentarily forgotten in the agony of his mind. For now, he moaned, "If I had died then, now I would be lying down in peace. I would be asleep. I would be at rest." The word rest hung in the air, a beautiful, impossible jewel. "I would be at rest with kings and with counselors of the earth who built desolate places for themselves. I would be with princes who had gold, who filled their houses with silver." He looked at his own scarred, broken hands holding the piece of pottery. There, in that place, the wicked cease from their troubling, and there, the weary are at rest. The prisoners are at ease together. They do not hear the voice of the taskmaster. The small and the great are there. and the servant is free from his master. He had described a world that was the perfect inversion of his own, a kingdom of peace where he was the only citizen. His voice rose for the first time, cracking with an anguish that was almost an accusation. Why is light given to him who is in misery, and life? Why is life given to the bitter of soul? He was no longer speaking of the past, but of the agonizing, unbearable present. Why give life to those who long for death, but it does not come, who dig for it more than for hidden treasures, who would rejoice exceedingly and be glad when they could find the grave? He finally looked at his three friends, his gaze traveling over their horrified faces, as if seeing them for the first time. Why give life to a man whose way is hidden, whom the Creator has hedged in? His lament ended, not with a curse on his Creator, but with the simple, terrible facts of his own state. For my sighing comes before my food, and my roarings are poured out like water. For the thing that I greatly feared has come upon me. The thing I dreaded has happened to me. He lowered his head, his voice fading back into a whisper. I am not at ease. I have no peace. I have no quiet. He took one last, shuddering breath. I have only turmoil. The silence rushed back in, but it was a new silence. It was broken, charged, and terrified. The 7 days of quiet were over. The debate for Alistair's soul had now begun. Alistair's lament, a thing of fire and darkness, hung in the air. The raw, unfiltered agony of it had shocked his friends into a new, deeper silence. They had come to comfort a man in grief, but this was not grief. It was something else. It was an unraveling, a curse against the very fabric of creation, a why that sounded dangerously close to an accusation. Cormac, the eldest, the one who had seen the most winters, felt the burden of a response. As the senior, it was his duty to speak, to restore order to the chaos Alistair had unleashed. He shifted in the ashes, the first to move in a long time. He cleared his throat, his voice dry. If one ventures a word, he began, his tone measured, almost gentle, will you be impatient? Will you be grieved? Alistair did not look up, his body still coiled in turmoil. Cormac continued, his voice attempting a kindness that felt thin and strained. But who can keep from speaking now? Who can hold his tongue when words like yours are spoken? He leaned forward slightly, trying to catch his friend's eye. Think, Alistair, think back. Remember the man you were, your words. Your words have instructed many. You have strengthened the weak hands. Your counsel has upheld the one who was falling. You have made firm the feeble knees. He paused, letting the memory of Alistair's former self settle in the air. Then, his voice hardened, just a fraction. The kindness was gone, replaced by the cool edge of correction. But now, Cormac said, it comes to you, this trouble, and you are impatient. It touches you, and you are dismayed. Alistair flinched, a small, pained movement. It was the first blow. You speak of your suffering, Cormac said, his voice gaining the familiar cadence of a man delivering a judgment. But you have forgotten the foundation of all things. Stop now and consider this. He raised a finger, as if teaching a lesson. Consider now, who, being innocent, has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? The question was a hammer aimed at the very heart of Alistair's integrity. Cormac was not asking, he was telling. As I have seen, he went on, and I have seen many seasons. Those who plow iniquity, and those who sow trouble, they are the ones who reap the same. It is a law, Alistair. It is the law of the world. By the blast of the Creator, they perish. By the breath of his nostrils, they are consumed. The implication was horrific. It was not a wind from the wilderness that killed Alistair's children. It was the breath of the Creator. And it was a just punishment for a hidden sin. Alistair made a low sound, a growl of protest, but Cormac was not finished. He had to provide the proof. His logic was not enough. He needed to show its divine origin. "It was not just from my own experience that I learned this," Cormac said, his voice dropping, becoming mysterious. "A thing was brought to me in secret. A thought came to me in the disquiet of the night, when deep sleep falls on men." Peregrine and Thane leaned in, listening. Alistair remained motionless, a statue of resistance. "Fear came upon me," Cormac whispered, "and trembling, which made all my bones to shake. A spirit, a presence. It passed before my face. The hair of my flesh stood up." He described it, his eyes wide with the memory. "It stood still, but I could not discern its form. An image was before my eyes, and there was silence, a deep, cold silence. And then I heard a voice that was not a voice." "And what did it say?" Thane breathed, caught in the story. Cormac turned his gaze to Alistair. "It said, 'Can a mortal be more just than the Creator? Can a man be more pure than his Maker?' He let the heavenly question settle, a final, unanswerable weight. He puts no trust in his servants. He charges his angels with error. How much less then in those who dwell in houses of clay, whose foundations are in the dust, who are crushed before the moth." Cormac's argument was complete. He had laid his trap. The logic was perfect, circular, and deadly. No man is pure. The Creator is just. Therefore, all suffering is deserved. "You have spoken in turmoil, Alistair," Cormac concluded, his voice softening again, but it was the false softness of a victor. "But this is not the way. The trouble you feel, the pain that eats your flesh, it does not spring up from the ground. It comes from within. You must have sinned. You must have erred. Accept this. Search your heart. Find the hidden fault, for that is the only path back. You are not innocent. You cannot be." Alistair had listened to Cormac's entire speech, his head bowed, his body unmoving. The elder's words, meant to be a balm of wisdom, had fallen like heavy stones, each one bruising him more deeply. The silence that followed Cormac's conclusion was thick, filled with the self-satisfaction of a man who believed he had solved the problem. Finally, Alistair's shoulders began to shake. It was not with sobs, but with a dry, bitter laugh that sounded like stones rattling in a jar. His head came up, and his eyes, though clouded with affliction, burned with a cold, clear fire. "Are you finished?" he asked, his voice a raw wound. "Have your long speeches of wind come to an end?" Cormac recoiled, his face hardening. "Miserable comforters," Alistair spat, his gaze moving from Cormac to the other two. "Are you all?" He took a ragged breath. "I, too, could speak as you do. Oh, how easy it would be. If your soul were in my soul's place, I could heap up words against you. I could shake my head at your ruin and offer you the same empty proverbs." He gestured with his broken shard. "You offer me no comfort. Your wisdom is ash. You have come to mourn, but you sit as judges. You see my suffering, and you blame me for it. You have broken my heart a second time." Before Cormac could muster a reply, Peregrine, the traditionalist, lunged forward verbally. He had been sitting rigidly, his knuckles white, and this rejection of Cormac's elder wisdom was more than he could bear. "How long?" Peregrine snapped. His voice was not gentle like Cormac's. It was dry and sharp, like cracking parchment, a voice that had spent a lifetime reading from ancient scrolls and had no patience for the messiness of human pain. "How long will you speak these things?" he demanded. "How long will the words of your mouth be like a great wind?" "You are arrogant, Alistair. You accuse us, but you are the one speaking emptiness." Alistair stared at him, stunned by the sudden venom. "I will not speak to you of night visions," Peregrine said. casting a dismissive glance at Cormac. "Visions are for the uncertain. I will speak to you of what is known. I will speak to you of the great foundation. You do not have to listen to me. You do not have to listen to yourself." He jabbed a finger toward the ground. "Inquire, I beg you, of the former generation. Pay attention to what our fathers have discovered, for their wisdom is pure. We are but of yesterday, and we know nothing. Our days on earth are a shadow, but they will teach you." He took on the tone of a lecturer, his voice rising as he quoted the ancient code. "And what does their wisdom teach? It teaches one immutable, eternal law, Alistair. Listen to it." He paused, ensuring he had their full attention. "Does the Creator pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right?" The question was a trap, and its steel jaws were already closing. The answer is no, he cannot. It is his nature. Justice is the frame of the world. Having laid the foundation, Peregrine now built his terrible house upon it. His voice did not soften, it grew colder, more precise. Therefore he said, "Let us apply the law. If your 10 children, sinned against him." Alistair made a low, choking sound. "No. If they sinned against him," Peregrine repeated, overriding him, "and they must have, for the Creator is just, then he has delivered them into the hand of their own transgression. He has cast them away for their wickedness. It is a terrible thing to consider, Alistair, but it is a just thing. Their fate was earned." The cruelty of the statement hung in the air, breathtaking in its finality. He had condemned 10 dead children to justify a theological principle. Peregrine then turned his cold logic back to Alistair. "But as for you, if you would earnestly seek the Creator, if you would make your supplication to the Almighty, if you yourself were truly pure and upright in this moment, surely he would now rouse himself for you. He would restore your righteous dwelling." He leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "But you do not do that. You do not repent. You sit here and curse your day. You accuse us. You speak with a mouth full of wind and turmoil. What does this tell us, Alistair? It tells us your heart is not right either." He concluded with one final proverb, a neat summary of his entire worldview. "Can the reed grow tall without a marsh? Can the flag grow without water? While it is still green and not cut down, it withers before any other plant. Such is the path of all who forget the Creator. The hypocrite's hope, it perishes." He sat back, his arms folded, his case made. He had not comforted, he had condemned, and he had, in Alistair's heart, performed a second, more brutal execution on his children. The silence that followed Peregrine's judgment was of a different kind. It was not the silence of grief. It was the silence of a mortal wound, a stunned, breathless vacuum left behind by a cruelty so precise it had taken Alistair's very breath. To have his dead children named as sinners, to have their memory desecrated to uphold a dusty proverb, it was an act of violence. Alistair was not just in turmoil, he was in shock, unable to even form a word of protest. Cormac and Peregrine sat back, their wisdom delivered. They mistook this silence for stubbornness. They saw it as the mute, unrepentant posture of a guilty man who had run out of arguments. And then there was Thane. He was the youngest of the three, and he had been vibrating with impatience, waiting his turn, watching what he saw as the failed, soft-hearted attempts of his elders. Cormac was too mystical. Peregrine was too dry. Neither had struck the root of the problem. Thane was a man of black and white, a man of absolute, unbending dogma. He did not come to comfort. He came to correct. He did not wait for Alistair to respond. He lunged into the silence, his voice sharp and impatient. "Are we to be silent then, just because you are?" he snapped. "Are we to sit here while a man multiplies his words against the heavens and then expects no answer? Should a man full of talk be vindicated? Should your boasts, your mockery, make us quiet? Alistair looked up, his eyes dull with this new assault. You have claimed purity, Thane accused, his voice rising, sharp with scorn. You have said to us, my doctrine is pure, I am clean in your eyes. You have defended your own integrity as if it were a shield. You, a man, you, who are breathing dust. Thane leaned forward, his face a mask of zealous, righteous anger. Oh, how I wish the Creator would speak. How I wish he would open his lips against you, Alistair. That he would speak to you, and that he would show you the secrets of wisdom. He laughed, a short, barking, joyless sound. Do you know what he would show you? He would show you that true wisdom has two sides. He would show you the truth you are too arrogant to see. He lowered his voice, delivering the line that had been burning in his mind, the line he believed was the final truth. Know this, Alistair, you have not been treated unjustly. You have been treated with mercy. The Creator is exacting from you less than your iniquity deserves. The words were a scalding oil. To call this ruin, mercy. To suggest that the death of his 10 children, the loss of his world, the torment of his flesh, was a discount on a greater, deserved punishment. This was a condemnation beyond all measure. Having delivered his sentence, Thane then put on the robes of the pious, describing the very God he had just used as a weapon. Can you, by searching, find out the deep things of the Creator? He demanded, his voice now taking on a pretense of awe. Can you find out the limits of the Almighty? Can you, Alistair, in your infinite, self-proclaimed wisdom, measure him? It is as high as heaven, he declared, so what can you do? It is deeper than the grave, so what can you know? Its measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. He was painting a picture of a God so vast and unsearchable that Alistair's only possible response should be to collapse in guilty silence. If he passes by, Thane continued, if he imprisons someone, if he gathers the court, who can stop him? For he knows deceitful men. He sees wickedness. He sees it even when you do not. He locked his eyes with Alistair's, his meaning unmistakable. He sees you. The sermon was over. Now came the simple, brutal ultimatum. But, Thane said, raising his hand, there is a way. If you will prepare your heart, if you will stretch out your hands toward him, if the iniquity you are hiding in your hand, you put it far from you, if you let no wickedness dwell in your tents, if you stop your lying and your boasting, and you confess the truth. He painted a picture of the reward. If you do this, then you shall lift up your face without spot. Then you shall be steadfast, and you shall not fear. Your life will be brighter than the noonday. The darkness will be like the morning. You will be secure, because there is hope. Thane sat back, his argument complete. It was a perfect, transactional, and merciless piece of logic. He then added the final threat, his voice dropping to a cold monotone. But if you do not, he concluded, then the eyes of the wicked will fail. They will have no way to escape. Their hope, their only hope, will be the giving up of the Spirit. Their hope will be their last dying breath. The third friend had spoken. The circle of accusation was complete. Cormac had called him a sinner by experience. Peregrine had called him a sinner by tradition. And now Thane, in his dogmatic certainty, had called him a liar and a hypocrite deserving of even worse torment. Alistair was surrounded, sitting alone in the ashes, now truly and completely friendless. Thane's final brutal words fell into the ashes. The three friends now sat as a united front, a tribunal that had delivered its unanimous and merciless verdict. Alistair was guilty. He was a hypocrite. He was a liar. and his suffering was not only deserved but was a mercy compared to the greater punishment his hidden sins had earned. The silence was complete. The friends, their duty done, now waited for the confession, the final, broken admission that would prove their wisdom. Alistair remained hunched, his body a map of torment, his head bowed. When he finally spoke, his voice was not a whisper. It was a low, grinding sound, the sound of a stone being crushed, a sound of fury and clarity. "You have no understanding," he said, the words costing him a great effort. He slowly, painfully, lifted his head. He did not look at Thane. He looked at Cormac, the eldest, the one who should have known better. "You have come to comfort me," he said, his voice raw. "Instead, you have become my tormentors. Your wisdom is the twittering of birds, empty noise, a hollow wind. How long will you vex my soul? How long will you break me in pieces with words? You have reproached me," he continued, his gaze moving to Peregrine. "You have condemned me. You are not ashamed that you deal so harshly with me, and if it were true that I had erred, my error would remain with myself. It would not be for you to judge." He tried to push himself up, his arms trembling under his own weight before falling back. "But you have done more. You use my ruin as your proof. You magnify yourselves against me, and you use my own disgrace as your argument." He was breathing hard, the effort of speaking almost too much. "But know this, it is not you who has done this, it is the Creator. He is the one who has overthrown me, who has beset me with his net. He is the one." His voice broke, the anger giving way to the vast, cold ocean of his grief. "Behold," he cried out, no longer speaking to them but to the empty air, "I cry out of wrong, but I am not heard. I cry aloud, but there is no justice." The lament he had held back now poured from him, a torrent of confusion and pain. "He has walled up my way so that I cannot pass. He has set darkness in my paths. He has. He has stripped me of my glory. He has taken the crown from my head. He has destroyed me on every side, and I am gone, my hope, and he has pulled up like a tree. His wrath is kindled against me. He counts me as one of his enemies. His troops come together. They build up their road against me, and they encamp around my tent." He looked at his three friends, his eyes hollow. "He has put my brothers far from me. My acquaintances are estranged. My kinsfolk have failed. My familiar friends have forgotten me. Those who dwell in my house, even my maidservants, count me as a stranger. I am an alien in their sight. I call to my servant, and he gives me no answer. My wife, my own wife, is repulsed by my breath. Even young children despise me. When I rise, they speak against me." He was utterly, completely, perfectly alone. "All my inward friends," he whispered, "they abhor me. Those whom I loved have turned against me. My bones cling to my skin and to my flesh. I have escaped only with the skin of my teeth." He fixed his gaze on them, his voice a desperate plea. "Have pity on me," he begged. "Have pity on me, O my friends, for the hand of the Creator has touched me." "Why?" he cried. "Why do you hunt me, as he does? Why are you not satisfied with my flesh?" He paused, his body racked with a shuddering sob. He saw the coldness in their eyes. He saw they were unmoved. He saw that his plea for pity had fallen on rock. And in that moment, something in him changed. The pleading stopped. The softness vanished. His eyes cleared, and a new, terrible, defiant strength rose from the very bottom of his soul. "Oh," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "that my words were written, that they were inscribed in a book, that they were engraved with an iron pen and lead in the rock forever." He was no longer speaking to them. He was making a proclamation to eternity. He was appealing his case to a higher court beyond these three, beyond the ashes, beyond even the grave itself. "You sit there," he said, his voice trembling with a new, strange power, "and you wait for me to die. You wait for me to renounce my integrity. You have a God of transactions, a God of formulas. You do not understand." He fixed his eyes on some point beyond them, a place they could not see. "Though he slay me," he whispered, the words a vow, yet will I trust him. I will maintain my own ways before him. He himself will be my salvation. For a hypocrite, as you have named me, a hypocrite shall not come before him." His voice grew stronger. "You think this is the end. You think my death will be the proof of your wisdom. You think the dust will cover my words, and my integrity will be forgotten. You are fools. For I," he said, and his voice was no longer his own, it was the voice of pure, unexplainable conviction, "I know that my Redeemer lives." The three friends flinched, as if struck. "I know," Alistair continued, the words pouring from him now, "that in the end he will stand upon the earth. He will be my vindicator. And after this, after my skin, which you see, is destroyed, after this body is gone." He took a great shuddering breath, his eyes wide with a vision they could not share. "Yet," he declared, "in my flesh, I shall see the Creator. I myself, I shall see him. With my own eyes, I shall behold him, and not as a stranger." He collapsed back, the vision fading, the strength leaving him, his body consumed by the effort. My heart faints within me." He looked at them one last time, his voice a dry rasp, but his words were now a judgment, not a plea. "You should be afraid," he whispered. "You who say, 'Let us hunt him.' You who have decided that the root of the matter is found in me. You should be afraid of your own words. Be afraid of the sword, for wrath comes for such iniquities. Be afraid that there is indeed a judgment." Alistair's great, defiant prophecy, his cry for a redeemer, had shattered the consensus of his accusers. Thane, Peregrine, and Cormac stared at him, their faces a mixture of horror and confusion. This was not the confession they had waited for. This was not the broken, repentant sinner. This was something else. This was a man who had appealed his case to a court they could not see. They had no response. Their simple, transactional wisdom had failed. Their neat formulas of sin and punishment had crumbled. Alistair had not denied his suffering. He had, in their eyes, wrapped himself in it and declared it a form of vindication. Baffled and offended, they fell silent. The great debate was over. The anger that had fueled Alistair, giving him the strength to speak, now faded. It left him empty, hollowed out, and returned him to the cold, aching reality of his body. The ashes were still his bed. The shard was still his only companion. His friends had become mute, stony-faced judges. And the Creator, in whose name he had just made such a great, hopeful declaration, was silent. The silence that followed was the worst of all. His prophetic cry echoed in the emptiness and received no answer. The Redeemer he had proclaimed did not come. The vindication he had demanded did not appear. His defiance collapsed, not into guilt but into a new, deeper, and more profound loneliness. He had spoken to the heavens, and the heavens had offered nothing. He was no longer angry. He was simply and completely lost. "Oh," he whispered, his voice now just a dry rasp, no longer for his friends but for himself. "Oh, that I knew where I might find him." This was the new quest. His friends were useless. His wealth was gone. His children were dust. His own body was a betrayal. The only thing left was the one who had, in his words, walled up his way. "If only," he murmured, his mind wandering, "I could go to his dwelling. I would state my case before him. I would fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn the words he would answer me. I would understand what he would say. He was not seeking mercy. He was seeking justice. He was seeking an answer. Any answer. He looked around the empty, desolate space as if he could physically begin his search. If I go to the east, he reasoned, he is not there. If I go to the west, I do not find him. When he is at work in the north, I do not see him. When he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. He had searched every corner of his known world, and all he found was absence. This was the final, deepest agony. Not just suffering, but suffering in a void, abandoned by the very one he had refused to renounce. He sat in that void for a long time, the silence stretching. The last ember of his hope was dying. And then, from the deepest part of that void, a new thought emerged. It was not a vision, it was not a voice. It was a new, quieter, and more profound conviction. He looked at his own scarred hands. But he knows, he whispered, the words a sudden, small revelation. He knows the way that I take. He looked up, not at his friends, but at the empty sky. He knows my path, and when he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold. It was a faith stripped of all expectation, of all blessing, of all reward. It was not a faith that he would be saved from the fire. It was a faith that he would be proven in it. He then began to speak aloud, his voice clear, not in lament or defiance, but in quiet, awestruck reflection. There is a mine for silver, he said, and his friends stirred, confused by his new tone. There is a place where gold is refined, iron is taken from the earth, and copper is smelted from the ore. Man puts an end to darkness. He searches the farthest recesses for ore in gloom and deep shadow. He described the work of miners, digging far from where people live, hanging by ropes, finding treasures deep in the earth. But where, he asked, can wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? He answered his own question. Man does not know its worth. It cannot be found in the land of the living. The deep says, it is not in me, and the sea says, it is not with me. It cannot be bought with gold. The finest gold of Ophir cannot purchase it. He looked at his friends, his eyes clear for the first time. He was no longer their victim. He was their teacher. Where then, see, does wisdom come from? It is hidden from the eyes of all living. He paused and then delivered the answer, the one he had found in the absolute darkness. The Creator, he said, his voice soft, understands the way to it, and he alone knows its place. And to man, he said, behold, the reverence for the Creator, that is wisdom, and to turn from evil, that is understanding. Alistair fell silent. He had found his answer. It was not the one he wanted, but it was the one he had been given. He would wait. Alistair's words, his hymn to wisdom, settled over the small, miserable assembly. It was a conclusion. He had found a place to stand. Cormac, Peregrine, and Thane had nothing left to say. They had been outmaneuvered. Their wisdom had been exposed as noise. They were defeated not by argument, but by a conviction that was beyond their comprehension. They were offended. They were silent. Into this new, heavy silence, a new voice suddenly spoke. I am young in years, the voice said, and you are very old. That is why I was timid. That is why I was afraid to show you my opinion. The four men turned. It was Orion. He was a younger man who had been listening to their entire debate from a distance, silent and respectful. He was not a great man like the others, not a patriarch, but he had been in Alistair's household, and he had come to pay his respects. And he was shaking, not from fear, but from a burning, irrepressible anger. I said to myself, he continued, standing up and walking toward them, that age should speak, that abundant years should teach wisdom, but I see now that it is not so." He looked at the three friends. His face flushed. "It is a spirit in a man, the breath of the Almighty, that gives him understanding. It is not the old who are wise, nor the aged who understand what is right. Therefore I say, listen to me. I also will show you my opinion." He took a deep breath, the words pouring out of him now. "I have waited for your words. I listened to your reasonings while you searched for what to say. I paid close attention, and behold, there is not one of you who has refuted Alistair, not one who has answered his words. Do not say in your hearts, 'We have found wisdom,'" Orion accused them. "It is the Creator who will refute him, not you." He then turned, his expression pained, and faced Alistair. "But I was angry with you also," he said. Alistair looked up, surprised. "I was angry at your friends because they found no answer, and yet they condemned you," Orion said. "But I am also angry with you, Alistair, because you have justified yourself, rather than the Creator." This was new. This was a challenge from a different direction. "You have said, 'I am innocent, I am without transgression,'" Orion continued. "You cry out that you cannot find him, that he is silent. You say he counts you as his enemy." "You are wrong," Orion said, his voice firm. "In this, you are not right, for the Creator is greater than any man. Why do you contend against him, saying he will not answer? He is not silent, Alistair. You have just not been listening." This was the new idea, for the Creator does speak, Orion declared. He speaks now one way, now another, though man does not perceive it. He speaks in dreams, in visions of the night, to turn a man from his deed, to keep him from pride. He keeps his soul back from the pit. Alistair's eyes widened. "And he speaks," Orion said, his voice lowering through this. He gestured not at Alistair's body, but at his suffering. "He is chastened also with pain on his bed, with continual strife in his bones. This," Orion said, "is not just a punishment. You three," he shot at Cormac, "call it punishment. But it can also be refinement. It can be correction. It is the Creator's strange tool to save a man from his own path, to pull him back from destruction. He allows this pain so that he may bring him back to be illuminated with the light of the living." It was a third way, not the simple transaction of the friends, and not the defiant cry of Alistair. It was a new, more complex and more mysterious path. Orion's words began to change. He stopped debating and his eyes turned to the sky. He was no longer trying to win an argument. He was being caught up in a new thought. "How great is the Creator," he said, his voice filling with awe. "He is beyond our understanding. He draws up the drops of water, which distill in rain. He pours it down. He is mighty in strength." His words became a vivid, poetic description of a gathering storm. "Listen," he cried. "Listen to the thunder of his voice. He unleashes his lightning. He covers the roots of the sea. He gives food in abundance." As he spoke, a real wind began to blow, cold and sudden, whipping the ashes around their feet. The sky, which had been clear, began to darken with an unnatural speed. "He commands the lightning," Orion said, his voice now a shout over the rising wind. "He directs the clouds. The cold comes from the north. The ice is spread by his breath. He loads the thick cloud with moisture." The storm was no longer a metaphor. It was real. A deep, rumbling thunder rolled overhead. "He does great things," Orion cried, his face turned upward, "which we cannot comprehend. He says to the snow, 'Fall on the earth,' and to the rain, 'Be strong.'" He was no longer in control of his speech. He was describing the very event that was now enveloping them, a terrifying, sudden, and majestic tempest. The storm Orion had been describing now consumed them. The sky turned black, the wind howled, a physical presence, a shrieking, deafening force. It was not a normal storm. It was a storm of impossible power, a focused, terrifying vortex of energy. Cormac, Peregrine, and Thane cried out in terror, covering their heads, huddling in the ashes, which were now a blinding, stinging cloud. Even Orion, his speech of awe forgotten, fell to the ground in fear. Alistair did not move. He sat upright. He had been asking for an answer. He had been begging for the Creator to appear. He watched the swirling, impossible darkness with a sense of terrible final recognition. And then, a voice. It was not Orion's. It was not the wind. It was a voice that spoke from the very center of the whirlwind. A voice that was not a sound, but a force. A voice that seemed to form the wind itself. And it spoke directly to Alistair. "Who is this?" The voice boomed, a sound that shook Alistair's very bones. "Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge?" Alistair's heart stopped. He was being answered. "Brace yourself," the voice commanded. "Brace yourself now like a man, for I will question you, and you shall answer me." Alistair had wanted to state his case. He had wanted to fill his mouth with arguments. But now, in the face of this, all his words, all his grief, all his integrity felt like dust. The first question came, not in anger, but with the weight of eternity. "Where were you?" The voice paused, letting the question sink in. "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you have such great understanding." Alistair, his mouth dry, his body trembling, could say nothing. "Who?" the voice continued, wave after wave of impossible questions. "Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Who stretched the line upon it? On what were its foundations fastened? Who laid its cornerstone?" The voice filled with a sound that was almost joy. While the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of the Creator shouted for joy, the whirlwind howled, and the voice continued, relentless. "Who shut in the sea with doors when it burst forth, issuing from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band? When I fixed my limit for it, and set bars and doors, and I said, 'This far you may come, but no farther. Here your proud waves must stop.'" The questions turned on Alistair, personal and sharp. "Have you," the voice demanded, "commanded the morning since your days began? Have you caused the dawn to know its place? Have you entered the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you? Have you perceived the breadth of the earth? Tell me," the voice insisted, "if you know all of this. Where is the way to the dwelling of light? And darkness, where is its place? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the treasuries of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble?" Alistair was being dismantled, his entire world, his entire perspective, shattered by a vision of a reality so vast, so complex, so ancient, that his own suffering, as great as it was but a single tiny thread in an infinite tapestry. He had wanted an answer. He was being given an education. The voice from the whirlwind had not paused. The cosmic questions had left Alistair speechless, but the Creator had not finished his lesson. The questions now shifted from the inanimate cosmos to the living, breathing, and wild world. "Do you," the voice demanded, "hunt the prey for the lion? Do you satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens? Who provides for the raven when its young cry out and they wander about for lack of food? Do you know the time when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of the does? Can you number the months that they fulfill?" The voice painted a picture of a vast, intricate creation that functioned perfectly, entirely outside of Alistair's knowledge or concern. His household, which he had ruled with such care, was nothing compared to this. Who, the voice asked, sent out the wild donkey free? Whose bands did I loosen? I have made the wilderness his home. He scorns the tumult of the city. He does not hear the shouts of the driver. Does the wild ox consent to serve you? Will he stay by your manger? Can you trust him to do your work, to bring your grain to the threshing floor? The questions were a relentless, awe-inspiring tide. The voice was not just proving Alistair's ignorance, it was revealing a wisdom so profound, so personal, so attentive to the smallest raven and the wildest donkey, that it was a wisdom Alistair had never even dreamed of. Then, the voice shifted to the heart of the matter, to chaos itself. I will not keep silent about his limbs, the voice said, his mighty strength or his graceful form. Alistair, confused, did not know what creature this was. I speak, the voice clarified, of Behemoth, whom I made along with you. The voice described a massive, untamable land creature, a being of immense power. He is the first of the ways of the Creator. Only his maker can approach him. And then, can you draw out Leviathan with a hook, or press down his tongue with a cord? Will he make a covenant with you? Will you take him as a servant forever? The voice described the sea dragon, the symbol of ultimate chaos, a creature of terror. Can you fill his skin with harpoons? His heart is as hard as stone. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid. Nothing on earth is his equal, a creature made without fear. Alistair's heart pounded. He understood. This terrifying, chaotic creature that he could not control, the Creator spoke of it. It was his. He was the master of the very chaos that Alistair feared. The whirlwind stilled slightly. The Creator paused. Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct me? He who rebukes, let him answer. Alistair, his face in the ashes, trembling, found his voice. It was a hoarse whisper. Behold, he said, I am small, I am of no account. What can I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. I have spoken once, but I will not answer. Twice, but I will proceed no further. But the Creator was not finished. He had to be sure the lesson was learned. The voice came again, insistent. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer. Alistair looked up, terrified. And then, finally, the lesson was done. The questions ceased. The whirlwind held. Alistair looked into the heart of the storm, and for the first time, he did not see an enemy. He did not see an accuser. He saw. He spoke, his voice broken, not by grief, but by awe. I know, he said, that you can do all things. I know that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. He was weeping now, the tears washing the ash from his face. I am the one who darkened your counsel with words without knowledge. I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. He repeated the Creator's words back. But this time, in surrender, you said, listen, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me. He looked into the storm, and he spoke the final transformative words of his long journey. I had heard of you, he choked out by the hearing of the ear. I knew your name, I knew the rituals, I knew the traditions. But now, he said, now, my eye sees you. Therefore, he said, his body collapsing in on itself in total final surrender, I abhor my words, I despise them, and I repent. I repent here, in dust and in ashes. The storm stopped, the wind died. The silence that returned was no longer empty, it was full. The whirlwind was gone. The silence that remained was profound, a stillness that felt like the first morning of creation. Alistair sat in the ashes, his heart quiet, his questions gone. He was not healed. He was not restored. He was simply present. Cormac, Peregrine, and Thane looked on, terrified and humbled. The display of power had shattered their certainty as much as it had shattered Alistair's. Then the voice spoke again. It was not a whirlwind. It was calm, clear, and terrestrial. And it was not directed at Alistair. "My wrath," the voice said, and the three friends flinched, "is kindled against you, Cormac, and against your two friends." The three men fell on their faces. "You have not spoken of me what is right," the voice continued, as my servant Alistair has. The reversal was absolute. The man they had condemned was vindicated. The judges were now the accused. "So now," the Creator commanded, "take for yourselves 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Alistair, and offer up a burnt offering for yourselves." The next command was the most stunning of all. "And my servant Alistair, he shall pray for you, for his prayer, I will accept, and I will not deal with you according to your folly." The humiliation was complete. Their salvation now rested in the hands of the very man they had tormented. Humbled, shamed, and terrified, the three men did exactly as they were told. They gathered the great offering. They came to Alistair, who still sat in the ashes, and they begged him to intercede for them. And Alistair, his heart no longer a stone of grief but softened by his encounter, did as he was asked. He prayed for Cormac, he prayed for Peregrine, he prayed for Thane, he forgave them. The narrative makes a very specific point. It notes the exact moment the world turned. After Alistair had prayed for his friends, then the Creator turned his fortune. The restoration began. It was not a slow rebuilding, it was a flood of grace. The Creator, the text says, gave him twice as much as he had before. His kinsfolk and his community, who had shunned him, heard of his restoration and returned, filled with awe. They came to his house, and they ate with him, and they comforted him for all the trouble that had been brought upon him. His wealth was not just restored, it was doubled. He received twice the sheep, twice the camels, twice the oxen. The land which had been barren now prospered under his hand. And then his family was restored. He was given 10 new children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. And here the story pauses, as if to make a final, beautiful point. It names the daughters. They were called Cassia, they were called Evadne, they were called Seraphine. And the story notes that in all the land no women were found who were as beautiful as the daughters of Alistair. And in a final act, a sign of his new, transformed heart, Alistair did something unheard of. He gave his daughters an inheritance along with their brothers. The man who had been broken by rigid law now lived by a new, more generous grace. His life, which he had begged to end, was now extended. He lived a long, long time after his ordeal. He lived to see his children, and his grandchildren, and his great-grandchildren. And he finally died, not in turmoil, not in bitterness, not in a whirlwind. He died an old man, and full of days. His suffering had not been explained. It had been transformed. His questions had not been answered. They had been overwhelmed by a presence. And his faith, once a simple, untested thing, had been burned in the fire and had in the end come forth as pure gold. Thank you for joining us on this long and sometimes difficult journey through the story of Alistair. It is a story that does not give easy answers. It is a story that forces us to sit in the ashes, to listen to the arguments, and to face the whirlwind. It reminds us that faith is not always a shield from trouble, but is instead the thing that is forged in that trouble. Alistair's story is the story of moving from hearing about the Creator to truly seeing Him. We hope this story has given you something to think about, something to reflect on in your own times of testing. We are grateful you spent this time with us. Until we meet again, stay well and stay thoughtful.